Tonight on Crimewatch.
What are you doing?
Name the gang who abducted a postman.
Please don't hurt me.
Can you shed light on what they were up to? Hello and welcome to Crimewatch. We're live and I am surrounded by top coppers from around the UK, all hoping that your call will help solve a major crime. Over here, we've got a team from Warwickshire CID investigating the abduction of a postman. He was tied up in his own van by a man, would you believe it, wearing a sheep's mask just like this. Here's what happened next. You know, he was very lucky to survive. Over here, we have got detectives from Essex on the hunt for a serial sex attacker. He struck 5 times way back in the early 90s, but has never been caught. This is what he looked like at the time. Police now have his DNA. All we need tonight is his name. Now, up here is Rav with his wall of most wanted. Evening, Rav. Evening. And Matthew Amralawala goes behind the scenes of a murder investigation to see how police cracked it. What's in store in tonight's case, Matthew?
We're looking at the case of John Taylor, who abducted and murdered a 16-year-old girl in Leeds. The forensics in this case are absolutely fascinating.
OK, we've got all the details on that later. Women who work as prostitutes on the streets put themselves at risk every day. Now, of course, what they do is illegal, but it in no way justifies the horrific attack suffered by 2 women in Sheffield. The man was armed with a gun and extremely violent, but the evidence suggests he is also a family man. He needs to be caught. We have got so many strong clues on this. Someone watching, I reckon, will know who did it. Watch closely, and if you can help, call us.
Business, love.
Can we do it outside? Go on, all the way up. Strip. I said strip.
No! Get away!
Shit.
Clearly, prostitution isn't legal. However, that doesn't give the right to anyone, having brought a woman to a dark, lonely place like this, to then shove a gun into her face. The victim acted instinctively and bravely and fortunately managed to escape, shaken but unharmed. However, 3 weeks later, we believe the attacker returned to this side street off Rutland Road, where he picked up another girl who was working the streets. Unfortunately, this girl wasn't so lucky.
Business.
Yeah, get in.
I weren't expecting no dodgy or anything. There were no dodgy about him. He just looked like a family man that had just finished work.
You've been working?
Earlier on, yeah.
Looked like him and his family had been in car, been on a long day trip or something, and they just chucked the empty crisp packets and chocolate, empty pop bottles, just chucked on the floor.
You know somewhere where we can go?
Can we do it outside? I don't want to do it in the car.
Here.
No, right to the end. Here. Now, straight.
Why are you doing this?
To stop you girls from working. Stop you doing what you do.
I haven't done anything. What have I done to you?
You shouldn't be doing this. It's all your fault.
Don't hurt me. I've got kids. Please just don't hurt
Shut
me.
up and strip.
I thought we were going to die. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I didn't know if I was going to see my family again. I was thinking about my kids. I just thought, let him do what he wants and get it on and done with quicker. Just say I work streets. It don't mean any man can do what they want to a working girl because they can't. I'm still a human being. I've still got heart, and I've still got feelings. Nobody deserves to get raped. Nobody. No. He had no right doing that. No right whatsoever.
There were 2 attacks on 2 women. Looking at the e-fits and the descriptions that we've been given and the methods used, I believe there's every chance that the same man and the same vehicle were involved in both of these incidents.
Strip. Strip.
This is a mock-up of the car the attacker used. It's a silver Vauxhall Astra Estate, an older model, fitted with roof bars, and in the rear was a baby seat. In the front, the car was a real mess. There were papers strewn on the seat, on the dashboard. There was litter on the central console in the footwell. The receipts indicate to me that this man might have been in Sheffield working temporarily, possibly as a contractor of some type. Red light areas in larger cities tend to be a magnet for men from the surrounding area. This offender might be local, but I wouldn't be surprised if he'd driven anything up to an hour to be in Sheffield that night. This man is dangerous, and I'm worried that he might offend again.
He could use that gun. He's a dangerous man. He deserves to be locked away, put away. Not only for my safety, but for somebody else. Horrible, dirty, evil man. That's what he is.
Well, I'm joined now by DI Richard Liversidge. I mean, really strong clues about this bloke. I reckon somebody watching it must know who he is.
I think that's exactly right, with a lot of significant information. In addition to the information you've just seen, the second victim tells us that the attacker had 2 distinctive tattoos, one on each thigh, which were possibly red and blue in colour. I think some present or former wife, girlfriend, partner will know this gentleman, and I would ask that they get in touch with us tonight.
Okay, we've got 2 e-fits. Just take me through the description of this guy again, so as people are sure.
Yeah, other than the specific information I've just mentioned, he's a white male, he's 5'6" tall, he's got a bald or shaven head, he's of stocky build, and he's aged around 40 years of age. I think he may be local to Sheffield. He may have been working in the city, or he may have travelled to Sheffield that night. One thing that strikes me as unusual is Given the existence of the baby seat, the child seat, he does appear to have some sort of family life. But in the first offence, he was obviously absent from home during the early hours of Christmas morning, which might be significant or unusual for some people.
Some bells.
It
is also important that people know that if they do call in with a name that they have a suspicion about, they can be eliminated if it's not them through the DNA.
That's right. I can reveal that we have got DNA evidence in relation to this case. And that means obviously that we can use that to assist us to rule out anyone who's not responsible for this offence. So what I would say to people tonight is if you do have any concerns or suspicions about anyone, please ring us and tell us that name.
That's for sure. Thanks very much, Richard. If you can help, as Richard says, do call us. The number's right there on the screen. If you have been a victim of crime, there is the victim support line 020 7268 0200. And now here's Rav with some criminals caught on camera.
Right, here we go. Now watch closely, and if you recognise anyone, get on the phone. Now I must warn you that some of this footage you may find disturbing.
4 lads in a jeweller's in Watford in March, and there's something dodgy going on. One distracts the manager, while the others rig the door open with a mirror from the shop. The manager's suspicious, but it's too late. They leap over the counter and grab him. Off screen, they pin him to the floor, tie him up and hit him, demanding keys to the safe. Then, by chance, in walks the manager's dad. He wants to know what's going on. Armed with only a walking stick, he tries to take on one of the robbers, but it doesn't work. He arms himself with a hammer, but it's no use. He's quickly bundled out of the way. The robbers can't get into the safe, so help themselves from the cabinets. Finally, the manager pushes the panic button and the robbers scarper. They stole cash and jewellery and probably think they've got away with it. Let's prove them wrong. Early hours of Saturday morning at Clapham Junction Station last October, and there's a platform full of people waiting for the last train home. It's not long before there's trouble. A group of men are throwing food around, and this man here asks them to stop. What does he get? A torrent of abuse. One man stops throwing food and starts throwing punches. The victim gets a blow full in the face, breaking his jaw. Pointless, mindless violence. Who is he? Finsbury Park, North London, last November, and we need to identify this man. Here he is, going into the mosque. Later that evening, police believe he was involved in an unprovoked attack on a man in Blackstock Road. The victim was slashed across the face with a knife, severing an artery. He needed 40 stitches and is now scarred for life. Can you give us a name? There's a 10 grand reward leading to the arrest and conviction of the attacker. A Saturday night in March, and this man's roaming round the streets of Ilford. At the station, he stops a group of lads before walking back the way he came, pulling his hood up as he goes. He doesn't look like he's in much of a hurry. Here he is, heading for the Blue Ice Bar, and he's looking for one of the bouncers. From another camera, we get a better look at what happens next. He picks out his target, pulls a gun, and fires. Zahib Mehdi was shot 3 times at point-blank range. He didn't stand a chance and died. It was a cold-blooded assassination. Name, please.
Think you know anyone? Well, call us here in the studio. The number's on your screen now. Or you can text us on 63399. Just type crime, space, and then your message. Really important to leave that space or your message won't get through.
If you need a second look at tonight's CCTV, it is on our website, bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. Still ahead, can you name the serial sex attacker who struck 5 times in the early 90s but has never been caught?
In there.
I've got a knife. Do what I say. Get undressed. Both of you.
And the story of how police caught this man, John Taylor. He murdered 16-year-old Leanne Tiernan and went to extraordinary lengths to cover his tracks. But all the clues pointed to him, including a dog collar and a microscopic particle of pollen found in Leanne's nose.
Now, I have to tell you, I think our next case is pretty bizarre. It involves a local postman in Warwickshire. Back in February, he was on his rounds when 2 men abducted him. One of them was wearing a sheet mask, something pretty similar to this here. Police have no idea why it happened, but it was an ordeal that very nearly cost the postman his life. We pick up the story 2 days before the attack.
That was the first in a series of bizarre events witnessed by locals here in Wishaw, Warwickshire. Comedy mask, but the two blokes in the Mondeo were no jokers. What were they up to?
Morning, Mr. Jones.
All right, young man.
Hey, dude. Edgy's looking nice. What are you doing? Shut up and get in there.
Please, don't hurt me, I've got kids.
Be quiet, you won't get hurt. I ain't got nothing against you.
Please let me go, please. Please, stop me. Just let me go.
Shut up.
I won't tell anybody, I will.
Shut up. Shut up your mouth.
I'm not going to do anything, just do it. Don't hurt me.
Don't make me tell you again, you know. Keep your mouth shut.
The local postie bundled into the back of his own van by a man wearing a sheep's mask. You couldn't make it up, and it was witnessed by one of the locals.
Well, I was here sitting having my cup of tea, and I hear some fracas outside.
What are you doing? Shut up and get in there.
And I shouted, what's going on there? Then I saw the back door of the van was open, and somebody was throwing something into the back of the van. I ran out here, ran to the gate. Dog was following me and barking. I thought he looked funny when I looked at him. His head looked funny, for a start, you know. Looked like a mongrel dog or something. The chap from the back of the van jumped in, and before he shut the door, his van was already going. He said, it was so quick you couldn't count to two before it was all over.
What time you hit me back at the depot?
11:30.
Don't mess with me!
What a car, please. Don't hurt me.
Nothing will happen to you if you do as you're told. Do you have a tracker fitting?
I don't know.
Do you have a tracker fitting?
I don't know.
Look out for the white van. It's not here. not here.
Keep your eye. Look left, look right.
It's not coming. Call it off.
What's the story with the white van they were waiting for? And why hadn't it turned up? It certainly looks like the kidnappers had some sort of plan, but it was going pear-shaped. They decided to take drastic action.
He said if I was partying, he'd let me go. Let me out! Let me out! You better be quick then. Just put me in the back of that.
I need help now.
I don't know what they want. Keep me there. I'm going to burn it up.
Oh. Okay? Yeah.
The experience left the postman shattered. He spent 40 years doing a job he loved. Now he's so shaken, he may never be able to work again. Who did this to him and why?
An extraordinary story, that is. I'm joined by DI Kate Tompkinson. You're investigating this along with your team. I mean, the world is a very odd place, but this certainly takes the biscuit. What on earth do you think was going on?
Well, we obviously think that this is something bigger than what it was, and that these two men wanted this postal van in order to go on and commit further crime using it as a cover vehicle.
So it seems as though something clearly went wrong. What do you deduce about this white van they were talking about?
Well, the white van was very significant to these men, and when it failed to turn up, they clearly panicked about that. Whether that was that they were meeting an accomplice, or whether it was the fact that the white van was going to be a further target of theirs, but quite clearly they had little value for the postal worker and his van, and something bigger was at stake.
Postman. I mean, it was a terrible thing that happened to him, but he was lucky to survive with his life.
Well, we are investigating a kidnap, but quite clearly this could have been something much more serious. This has had a devastating effect on the postal worker. His life has been shattered. He now feels unable to leave the house. He feels unable or unwilling to return to the work that he loved. And obviously this was a very cruel and serious crime that we would urge the public to come forward and help us with.
The most bizarre aspect of it being these masks, we think they were two. What have you got to say about them?
Yeah, we believe two masks were involved, and we would urge that any persons who have sold similar masks to persons fitting the description of those shown in the reenactments contact the police. Equally, if they've been asked to dispose of such masks or whether they've seen such masks, to make that phone call.
You know, can I make it clear to people, we don't want people calling up just say, I know where you can buy them, or I've seen them on eBay, or we're not interested in that. It's people who may have sold them to guys fitting the description we saw in the video, or people who maybe find them in their bin, find them in their garden. It seems strange. What about the blue Mondeo, briefly? What can you tell us about that? A smart woman noting down the number.
Yes, well, we do know that that is a legitimately owned vehicle, in that we've spoken to the registered keeper. He is eliminated from our inquiries. However, we believe a false plate was used, so therefore we would urge that any sightings of that number plate are reported to the police for us to investigate.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. If you can help shed light on this mystery, then call us here in the studio. The number is there on the screen. You can also call the independent charity Crime Stoppers anonymously. Their number, 0800 555 111. The Royal Mail has also put up a 25 grand reward for information leading to the arrest and successful prosecution of the people involved. Now here's Rav with some of the UK's most wanted.
Right, you know the drill. Anyone you recognise up here, then give us a call. First up is Michael Sansbury. He's wanted in connection with sexual offences against a child. He's got a tattoo of the word Mick on his arm and has connections to the TT races on the Isle of Man. He may have changed his appearance, so check out the website for more pictures. Now, police want to speak to our next two about a sexual assault on a woman in Rochester, Kent in November. 2 is Ali Cardo and 3 is Shamal Hussein. Now, they both also have connections to Gravesend. And Gary Richards is number 4, and he's wanted for a series of house burglaries across Northern Ireland. Richard has connections to other parts of the UK, including Hampshire. So if you can help, don't wait, phone or text the numbers on your screen now. And this lot are also on our website, bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch, and they'll stay there until they get caught. So it's well worth having a look in case you've missed any from previous programmes.
Next, these detectives from Essex need your help with a cold case from way back in the early 90s. The man we're after struck 5 times over a 2-year period, but has never been caught. We know what he looked like at the time, and scientific developments have now provided his DNA. Tonight, we just need his name. Here's what happened.
This is Mandeville Way in Landon near Basildon, and it was here in 1990 that a serial sex attacker picked his first 2 victims.
Oh, look. That man. What's he doing? He's got a stocking on his head.
I knew there was no one else around, and I just knew that things weren't right and that he was coming towards us with a reason.
Oh, I like you both.
Get off of me!
Lay back.
Even though one of the girls stood up to the offender, he still managed to sexually assault her friend.
Leave her alone! Leave her!
Later, the girls helped police with this e-fit.
Being the first one that was attacked, I've always felt like I could have stopped him because he went on to do a lot worse.
A week later, the offender is back in this area. Again, he chooses to stalk 2 young girls walking in this country park.
It's cute though, isn't it? Yeah. I think... He's so dead. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay,
that was really weird.
Did you see that guy?
Where's he gone? I don't know. I know. That was really weird.
Come on.
Just keep walking.
For some reason, he aborts the attack, probably due to the presence of a dog walker. However, the next day, he's back and tracks the same 2 girls.
Look, there's that guy we saw yesterday. Just keep walking, yeah? Where's he gone?
Stop your... Don't move or scream. Come with me. Now, come with me. Now, in there.
I realised what he might be going to do, but the main thing that was in my head was whether or not he was going to kill us.
In there. I've got a knife. Do what I say.
Please.
Get undressed. Both of you.
When someone's got a knife to your throat, you sort of like put it in their hands. You don't want to sort of upset them in any way.
Come on.
Because, you know, you don't know what they're like as a person. They might just suddenly turn and we could both be dead.
I'm going in a minute. And remember, I've got a knife. I've also got a gun. You can't see my gun, but I've got one. And I'll use it if you try anything silly. All right? I'll shoot you. Yeah? It may not kill you, but it'll definitely hurt a lot. Remember, Stay here for a while.
Both girls suffered an horrific ordeal and were raped. They were left bound. The offender was later seen running, unmasked, by a witness on a horse.
Get it off. Come on.
Please.
Take it off. Get it off. Now.
That young woman was violently raped. 14 months later, he's looking for another victim. On this occasion, things didn't go according to plan.
We're in the woods. I'm gonna get out.
The final victim wasn't so fortunate.
Or I'll kill you. Remember this, yeah? Take off your shoes. Get them off.
Who carried out these attacks? Do you know him? If so, I'd urge you to call us tonight. This man remains at large and is still a potential threat to other women and girls.
Well, I'm joined now by Professor David Cantor. Hello again, David. David is a pioneer of investigative psychology and one of the country's leading criminal profilers. What does this series of attacks over 2 years tell us about the person who perpetrated them?
Well, the most interesting thing about these attacks is that they are really very close to each other. And we know that these sorts of offenders often prowl an area trying to find opportunities for victims. So that has to be an area that they can get to easily and frequently. And so typically it's the place near where they live or have a job or know somebody, or usually where they live.
What do you make of the fact that he asked his victims to strip?
Well, he wants to control his victims. He wants to embarrass them, probably, hopefully, that they'll feel more vulnerable when they're undressed, and it probably gives him some sexual excitement as well.
Now, these attacks all happened during the day. Is that indicative of anything? Does it mean he was unemployed, or what can you tell us from that?
Well, one attack was early in the morning, and other of the attacks were later in the day. So, again, it fits in with this idea that because these crimes are all really within a mile or so of each other, that this is somebody who has some reason for being there and possibly could get away from work or was unemployed.
Now, the women all told us very specific things about the kind of language he used, and it was highly, I would say, highly instructive language. He was telling them all along the line what to do.
Yes, he seemed to come out of a sort of an environment almost where we're used to himself being told what to do and how to do things, and that's the sort of language he used. So it fits in with what we know about these sorts of offenders. They often have a criminal background, not necessarily for crimes associated with sex or violent crimes even, often burglary or theft, and so he may well have had some contact with the police in the past.
Are you likely to be able to work out whether or not this man would have been in a relationship around about 1990, 1992?
Well, obviously he's in his 40s now, so it's been a long time, and he could well be in a relationship now. But it is interesting that during the crimes, he did have a stocking over his head. Where did he get it from? And the way he dealt with the victims somehow implied that he was used to having relationships with women, possibly with younger women. So he could well have had a relationship in the 90s.
Yeah, the police that I've been talking to looking into the case say they reckon now he's between, they're quite a broad spectrum, 35 and 55, they're saying they're looking for.
Well, that's right. The victims gave his age of round about the early 20s, which is the typical age of people who carry out these sorts of assaults, and now it's 20 years on or so.
What about women watching who might think there's things about that ring a bell? Would there be clues, personal clues to a woman who was living with this man or having a relationship with him as to whether or not he is likely to be the attacker?
This sort of attacker, the interesting thing about him is he may not show signs very obviously of being such a nasty individual, because he wasn't especially really viciously violent to these women. He was only violent enough to control and frighten them. So a woman who knew a man who was very determined to be in control, who had possibly some sort of criminal history, but most crucially lived in this area or knew a lot about this particular area at the time of the assaults.
David, it's always fascinating to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming in this evening. I mean, some of this might ring a bell with you. Is it someone you think you know? Remember, we are talking about Langdon in Essex. The attacks took place between early 1990 and 1992. At the time, the attacker looked something like this. He might have changed quite a lot since then, of course. A long time has passed. If you can help, don't forget that we have got a full DNA profile, so any wrong names can very quickly, very simply be eliminated. Call us here in the studio. The number's right there, it's on the screen. You can also call Crime Stoppers, the number for that, anonymously, 0800 555 111. Details on this case are also on our website. Indeed, if you're interested in criminal profiling, it is a fascinating subject. There is an in-depth interview with Professor Cantor at bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch. Now, here's Rav with some good news on previous cases.
First up, a result on a case we featured last July, the brutal murder of Helen Morn.
Helen's body was found dumped in a river in Colchester, Essex. She'd been beaten and sexually assaulted. We showed CCTV of her in pubs just hours before she was killed. Following the programme, police discovered new CCTV which showed these two teenage boys walking with Helen towards the river. They were just 16 and 13 years old at the time.
At court, they blamed each other for Helen's death. But just last week, they were both sentenced. Young got life for murder. Hayward got 4 years for manslaughter.
Well, 2 years ago, we reconstructed the murder of delivery driver Balbir Matharu. He spotted two thieves breaking into his van in East London. When he tried to stop them, they drove straight at him.
Oi! Oi! Stop that! Oi!
Go, go.
Oi! Stop! What are you doing?
He's under, mate. He's under, he's under.
Balbir was dragged under the car for 40 metres and died from his injuries. Well, as a direct result of our appeal, these two men were arrested. They're Tommy and Albert Willett. Both were found guilty of murder and sentenced to life.
In March, we appealed for your help to catch the killer of a mum from Bolton. You'll remember the case.
Sarah Melia was stabbed to death in her own home, and her body was found by her 15-year-old daughter.
Mom! Mom! Someone please help me! Help me, please!
2 weeks ago, a man was arrested and charged with Sarah's murder. He'll face trial later in the year.
Also in March, we featured a gang of thugs who targeted Asda in Longsight in Manchester. It took place in the middle of the night, long after the store had closed. The gang attacked the security guard and left him for dead. They then nicked a road roller and attempted to break in. Well, 2 weeks ago, 4 people were arrested.
We return now to a case that we featured exactly 2 years ago. the murder of a young Liverpool mum, Lucy Hargreaves. At the time of her death, she was at home watching TV. Her boyfriend, her daughter were upstairs asleep. In a moment, I'll be speaking to Lucy's aunt and uncle. But first, here's what happened.
Get the pestle.
Lucy! Oi! Lucy!
Come on.
Sophie! 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 Lucy! We're gonna have to jump you again, come on. On! Hurry up! Come on, let's go! Come on! Come on! You alright? It doesn't look too good.
Well, it's a terrible thing, isn't it? Lucy would have been 25 next week. With me now is Lucy's aunt and uncle, Pam and David Cunningham, and DCI Ian Mulcahy. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Pam, can you give us some sort of an idea of the impact that Lucy's horrendous death has had on your family?
Devastation is the only word I can say to describe it. For someone to be murdered in such a gruesome fashion, an innocent young mum, it's just mortified the whole family.
David, give us some idea of what Lucy was like as a person. I can see a picture of her here with her. She's got a beautiful smile. What sort of person was she?
She was great, you know. She was always having a laugh, just smiling all the time, just a lovely mum. And, you know, just say she was getting on, she was going to college. She was just having a good time. She just got back from a holiday before this happened. Right. You know, and basically, like, you know, she was just a lovely girl.
What's it like for you? What's it like for the family?
Well,
knowing that...
devastated, yeah. And knowing, like, they still haven't got anyone for the crime. It's, you know, we just can't say, words can't say what we feel like, you know.
And the thought of the sort of person that would walk in and do this to someone.
Well, if you think about the crime, that he wasn't hard, was he? You know, they burst in into the house. They're not hard men, they're just cowards. Simple as that, like, you know.
The worst sort of violent cowards, yeah. Ian. You're heading up this investigation. You've done a lot of work to date, but there was an unsuccessful court case last year. What stage are you at right now?
Kirsty, I think it's important to emphasise that this is not the murder of a criminal. This is the brutal murder of a young mum. And as David says, was killed in such cowardly circumstances, and we're determined to catch the people responsible.
The worst sort of person that would do this. Do you have any idea what the whole thing was about?
Yes, we believe it was a targeted attack, but again, I want to stress that Lucy was an innocent victim of this. I believe that people in the local community have important information that can assist us bringing those people to justice, and I would urge those people to come forward and contact the police.
That's the key, isn't it? You have done a lot of work, it has to be said. There is one name, one man that is key to all of this, you think?
That's right. Kevin Powell is wanted for the murder of Lucy. We've secured a £10,000 reward, and again, I'd urge people to contact the police if they know of his whereabouts.
Ian, thanks to you, Pam and David. Thank you very much for coming in to talk to me this evening. If you can help, you must call us here in the studio. You know the number. Now, here's Rav with more faces in the frame.
Right, let's see if you recognise any of this lot. My number 5 is Colin Miller. He's wanted in connection with an attempted murder in Rotherham last July. There's also an allegation of rape in Tottenham in 2005. He's 28 and has connections to Aberdeen. Our next double act are wanted for a robbery at a haulage firm in Grantham, Lincolnshire. 6 is John Kinsella. He managed to escape from court after being found guilty. And 7 is James Muldoon. Now, he was also found guilty in his absence. Both men were sentenced to 27 years between them. But where are they hiding tonight? And last, but by no means least, is Nimalan Navaratnam. And police want to talk to him about £15,000 stolen from a BP garage in Coventry. Now, he might now be living in London. If you do see him, you know what to do. Get dialing. The number's on your screen now. Or remember, you can text us on 63399. Just type crime, space, and then message. Don't forget to leave that space, or your message won't get through.
I have to tell you, you're getting scores of calls on this Sheffield sexual assault. Remember, that's the guy with the gun and the baby seats, crucially, in the back. One particularly interesting call. Can't tell you too much just now, but it is looking promising. It's time now for a behind-the-scenes look at how detectives in Leeds solved the murder of schoolgirl Leanne Tiernan. She was strangled, wrapped in plastic and dumped in a wood. Matthew Amralawala takes up what I have to say is a particularly disturbing story.
Welcome to my talk show. Police have confirmed that the body found on Monday in woods in North Yorkshire is that of the missing teenager Leanne Tiernan.
Can you give me your full name, please?
John Taylor.
She's on her way home, and you've got hold of her and you've kidnapped her.
You don't have to shout!
What is it you've done?
Killed Leanne.
That was John Taylor, confessing to the murder of 16-year-old Leanne Tiernan. After a manhunt that lasted almost a year, police finally had their man. This is the story of how they caught him.
John Taylor, a 44-year-old parcel force employee with no criminal record, lived within a mile of where Leanne was abducted. Neighbours knew him as the Pet Man. He was a keen poacher who kept the dead animals in his kitchen.
Taylor didn't just kill animals. On the 26th of November 2000, he murdered Leanne.
The man charged with heading up the investigation was Detective Chief Superintendent Chris Gregg.
There was a lot of investigation that needed to be done in and around the Bramley area. We always thought the answer lay somewhere close to where Leanne had disappeared, and that turned out to be the case.
It was the largest search West Yorkshire had ever seen. Over 1,000 properties were visited, canals were dredged, and rubbish collections were halted, while detectives hunted for any sign of Leanne.
Police had little to go on, except for a man seen with a dog in the area close to where Leanne disappeared. He needed to be traced and eliminated.
And today they issued an artist's impression of a man they believe may have been walking his dog in the Huffley Lane area of Bramley an hour before 6.
Taylor was the man with the dog. Someone had seen him near the crime scene. He needed to throw police off the scent, and it seems he took drastic action. Months later, when police searched Taylor's garden, they found the skeleton of a dog. Its skull was shattered.
If Taylor had killed his dog to cover his tracks, it had worked. Several months into this investigation, and police still had no idea what had happened to Leanne. Taylor must have thought he'd got away with it.
As the weeks turned into months, of course, everybody starts asking that question. Where is this girl? What's happened to her? I remember when we got the report from North Yorkshire Police that a body had been found, I knew immediately it would be Leanne. I just instinctively knew it would be her.
Police have confirmed that the body found on Monday in woods in North Yorkshire is that of the missing teenager Leanne Tiernan.
The body was wrapped in bin bags. A dog collar had been used to fasten them.
As with every investigation, this was no different. You hope to get a quick breakthrough with DNA or fingerprints that can lead to the killer. That wasn't going to happen in this case.
The lack of any DNA or fingerprint evidence was a serious setback for the investigation.
Detectives regrouped and decided on a two-pronged strategy. First, a public appeal for the names of people with links to this place, Lindley Wood.
We asked ourselves a question: why the killer had taken Leanne's body to Lindley Woods? And we came with the simple conclusion: it's because he must have known them, and known them pretty well.
The public were extremely helpful, and the appeal generated hundreds of potential suspects. One of the names suggested was the poacher, John Taylor.
Detectives also set to work on the dog collar found on Leanne's body. They contacted the manufacturer and then began to trace all of the 220 wholesalers that had sold the collars.
We got to number 111 and had found nothing. Then number 112 was a mail order company in Liverpool. And when they checked the records for sales to anyone in Bramley or Leeds, there were 3 sales, but more importantly, one was to John Taylor.
This was a major breakthrough. John Taylor's name had cropped up in this investigation on 2 separate occasions. He'd been named as a poacher that used these woods, and now police could prove he'd bought a dog collar found on Leanne's body.
All the pieces started fitting into place for us from that point. We'd now got one name in the system twice.
John Taylor was now the prime suspect, but police were going to need science to help prove he killed Leanne.
The forensic science was a major part of this investigation, and you employed some very unusual experts.
In this particular case, we had this expert in pollen analysis, and her expertise is essentially in finding out where people took their last breath, because when you're taking that last breath, the pollen goes into your nasal cavity and sticks there. Pollen is quite sticky stuff. And by looking at these sorts of samples, she was able to identify particular garden plants and also traces of soot from a bonfire. And when it finally came to looking at John Taylor's house, we were stood in the garden, and the expert pointed at one spot in the garden and said she was there.
And the carpet fibres, they also turned out to be crucial, didn't they?
That's right. I mean, during the post-mortem, one of our scientists said stop. She could see a tuft of red fibres on the back of Leanne's jumper. And sure enough, when we pulled these off, there were distinctive red nylon carpet fibres. And so we thought, well, she's also been stored somewhere where there's been a red carpet.
Taylor had tried to cover his tracks and even remove the carpets from his house.
Now, when we came to John Taylor's house, all the carpets were gone. There was just floorboards in the house. But we're still able to find traces of these red fibres at the house and match them up to the ones on Leanne's back.
Again, incredible, that level of detail, that important part of the jigsaw.
I think in a sense it's classic forensic science in that it's these tiny traces that tell us so much about where the people have been.
10 months after Leanne disappeared, detectives had all they needed. John Taylor was arrested and charged with her murder.
John Taylor was described as a sexual sadist by the judge who sentenced him. I would echo those thoughts. A 16-year-old girl was subjected to the most terrifying of ordeals at his hands. There was huge relief from everybody concerned that John Taylor had been finally taken off the streets.
So, Matthew, how long did Taylor get?
Well, the judge said it was as cold and calculated an act as you could get, and gave him 2 life sentences.
Now, as we saw, this is quite unusual. He did actually confess on camera. Let's just take another look at John Taylor being interviewed by police.
Well, I've told you, I think, everything that I can tell you. I'm trying to tell you the truth in the best way I can.
But I'm asking you
still
if you...
very mixed up, but I've told you that I've admitted it, so I don't see that I've anything to hide. That sounds terrible.
You've
I didn't
admitted
mean
it.
that like that.
John, you've admitted it.
Yeah. What
is it you've done?
I killed Leanne.
You've killed Leanne?
Yes.
It's very strange watching that, isn't it? Because this seems at odds with the character you would imagine him to have. He seems quite compliant watching that.
Well, that was a charade, because he only admitted to stuff when he was backed into a corner. I mean, his version of events was extraordinary. He said he hadn't planned it. When he got back to the house, Leanne had somehow fallen from his bed and bumped her head, and then explained away the strangling. The judge cut right through it and said, you're simply trying to minimise your guilt.
And what about the science? It was extraordinary. It formed the very heart of this case.
The forensics were amazing. I mean, that pollen expert, that was a first to point to a spot and say it was there because of the proximity of the plants. And then later, when they discovered the body, the condition of the body didn't fit with being in the woods for 9 months. So at that stage, they called in a freezer expert, and they found tiny ice crystals in the organs of the body, and that suggested to them that Taylor had done exactly what they had thought, which was to put the body into a freezer and then to move it a lot later on. So all of that evidence together, and Taylor just couldn't run away from the facts, and that's why he confessed.
Matthew, thanks very much. Well, if you want to know more about the fascinating work of the Forensic Science Service, then Matthew's filmed an exclusive interview with Peter Grant, who you saw on his film earlier. You can watch it online, bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. Now here's Rav with a roundup of what's been happening on the phones tonight.
Now, we've heard we had some good calls on the Sheffield sexual assault, so it's over 40 now, and well over 20 names, which is fantastic. Then we showed you the Warwickshire postman attack. Do you remember the poor guy that was just doing his early morning rounds? He got kidnapped, bundled into the back of his van, tied up and set on fire. Well, we've had 10 calls on that, and some of those are very interesting, and the police are following them as we speak. Then the Essex cold case rapes, 29 calls on that. The EFIT has provoked a good response, and some of you have called in with information and names on them. We've got a lot more to tell you about CCTV and faces, but make yourself a cup of tea and join us in the update programme and you'll hear all about it.
Well, all tonight's cases, including the reconstructions, are on our website. There's also a short film revealing what actually goes on behind the scenes at Crimewatch. A chance to see the bits that you don't normally see. Here's a little sneak preview. This bit is the bit where you think, why do I do this job again? Why am I going live to X million people?
Everyone gets a little bit nervous, and if they say they don't, they're lying.
Well, I'm very confident we've got a very strong show. It's now about 3 minutes to transmission, so fingers crossed that some of these crims will be off the streets by the time we come off air at 10.
10, 9, 8.
Well, you can see the film in full on our website. I'll be logging on. I haven't seen it. bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. Our phone lines are open until midnight tonight and from 7:30 tomorrow morning. Don't go away, though, because we are back after the news with a full update on what's been happening on the phones tonight. If you can help and you haven't called yet, then please do it now. It could all be down to you. I'm going to see you at 10:35. Do join me then. For now, though, bye-bye.